Hi, this is a different kind of video. I am in Oslo. I am about to visit the National Museum. I've been here once before, but that was like straight off the plane, so I was a little tired. I've got a bit more energy today, I think, and just letting this bus go past. And yeah, no, I'm kind of trying something new with this channel. I've always loved art museums and going to art museums, and I want to review an art museum. Strictly speaking, this is an art museum. It's the National Museum is kind of a combination of stuff. It's very large, but it does have a significant wing of Norwegian and Scandinavian art, and other things, I'm sure. They had a really great exhibition on Piranesi, who was this Italian engraver. Really interesting designs, very ahead of his time, I guess. I think he'd be very popular now. And there's a book called Piranesi, which I haven't read, but I think it's worth reading. Maybe we'll do one day. But yeah, I'm gonna go in. Yesterday I actually tried to go, and it wasn't open, so my bad. We'll see how we get on today. So, the National Museum. I really like the National Museum. As we'll discuss later, it's not perfect, but to sum it up in a sentence, it's like the platonic ideal of a new national art museum. It's huge, state-of-the-art, and offers a national narrative of art within Norway, while also introducing visitors to the key movements of Western art in general. It's a pretty cool looking building, which, given that it costed over $720 million to build, it would want to be. It's large, but also somewhat unassuming. It fits very nicely into this sloping corner of the harbour front, and certainly conveys a stereotypical Scandinavian edge, which is also true of the lobby, which is similarly minimalist. With its tall square hallways and schist stone walls continued from outside, you feel a bit like you're visiting Jared Leto in Blade Runner 2049, which is cool, if I don't think about it too much. General admission is a bit steep at 200 kroners, but it's 110 for under 25s and free for kids, which is good. And if you're local, there's membership options which look decent to me. The under 25 membership option doesn't come with as many perks as the adult one, such as access to other museums in Sweden and Denmark, but it's not the end of the world. But let's talk about some art. I know I said before that the National Museum isn't strictly an art museum, but that's not entirely accurate. The museum is broadly divided between fine art upstairs and decorative art downstairs. These downstairs wings directly discuss the blurred lines of decorative arts, the artistry in these everyday objects, along with the lifestyles and social context of their times, all presented in chronological order. So you go through a pretty detailed journey through Norwegian history from a more domestic and ground level point of view. But while I like the idea of shedding light on these objects, especially given that they're so often the work of women and other people who have largely been excluded by the art world, I wasn't crazy about the decorative art section. I think it's well executed, but I just wasn't in the mood for it. It didn't help that I'd seen most of it already, so I was definitely anxious to get stuck into the fine arts floor, which I only saw part of on my first visit. But if you're interested in decorative arts, I don't think you'll be disappointed. There was also a sculpture wing downstairs, which was alright. I was more interested in the two paintings that were at either end of the room because I have a real thing for paintings depicting the behind the scenes of artistic spaces, but yeah, sculpture in general just doesn't do very much for me. Maybe that'll change, but it didn't here. So, upstairs. Similar to decorative arts, it's laid out in chronological order, so you go from flat religious art to more three-dimensional Renaissance paintings, all the way to some very abstract stuff altogether. My camera ran out of battery before I could get more footage of the later stuff, which is my fault for forgetting my second battery and being a hack and a fraud, but what can you do? There's a lot of art here, from all over Europe. There's a couple of rooms full of paintings by very well-known European artists such as Claude Monet, Vincent van Gogh, and Bertha Morisot, and let's not forget the obligatory Rodin sculpture. But what I found most interesting was the Norwegian art. I love these romantic landscapes by Petter Balke. Stettin in fog is kind of terrifying, while From North Cape has this remarkable lighting at the base of the cliff. There's also the paintings of Hans Gude and Adolf Tiedemann. The crispness of the air in bridal procession on the Hardangerfjord is so vividly captured, along with the light emitted by the fire and spearfishing on Lake Kroderen. I didn't realize these are some of the most popular paintings in Norway, which Duh. But I'd say they deserve their acclaim. And my word is gospel. Then there is Harald Solberg. He was a Norwegian painter who came to prominence at the turn of the century, and his paintings are some of the most iconic in Norwegian art history. He builds on the tradition of romantic landscape paintings by suffusing them with vivid colours and more impressionist depictions of the landscape, as seen in his most famous painting, Winter Night in the Mountains, where the mountain is blue and drawn in deceptively fluid lines, while the bare branches are like black shadows. But I also love his urban scenes like Street in Røros in winter, which combines a dismal winter sky with the streetscape featuring colourful buildings that the snow sits on like duvets and pillows. But the main event is the whole room dedicated to Norway's most famous artist, Edvard Munch. Munch towers over Norwegian art history, and rightfully so. As much as I'm skeptical of canon, especially within the art world, Munch is one of the masters, plain and simple. And I think the National Museum nailed it with them. Because you might reasonably ask, why would I bother seeing Munch in the National Museum when he has a whole museum of his own down the street? Well, naturally, if you want a more encompassing immersion into the man, the Munch Museum is your guy. But if you want an introduction or just a quick fix, the Munch room at the National Museum is perfect. Because it is just all killer no filler. One of the things with Munch, like Monet and Van Gogh, is that he had certain motifs he'd return to, so essentially you have multiple versions of the same painting, and I think the National Museum has the best ones. So we've got The Dance of Life, Madonna, Girls on the Bridge, and of course, The Scream. But my favourite painting in this room is actually one called The Day After, depicting a woman with a hangover, probably. It's not hard to see it as a modern contrast to the classical reclined nude, but there's an intimacy and sensuality that take it beyond being a cheap juxtaposition and make its subtext about gender, modernity, and substance abuse really hit home. So yeah, I like the art that they've got here. But by this point, I was getting pretty tired. Good thing the fine art floor is split by this big cafe. The cafe's fine, predictably expensive, and for such a large space, it wasn't that easy to find a seat. There's a nice view out of this big window, and while I like the idea of this whole open area, something didn't sit right with me, which we'll get into later. Danish went hard though. The second half of the fine art section plows on from the 20th century and beyond and gets, unsurprisingly, more abstract and less focused around paintings. I'm a big fan of Pavan by Carmen Herrera, but like I said, by this point I was pretty fried, but I'd definitely be curious to return because there is a lot to see. But we're not done yet, because there's a third floor with not only a large exhibition space, but also an outer courtyard with a little coffee truck, which I just love how in Oslo there's such an emphasis on open and accessible spaces. It makes me happy. The exhibition was about the relationship between humans and sheep, which I guess it didn't do that much for me. There was also an exhibition on drawings from the time of Bruegel and Rubens, which excellent clickbait guys, wasn't particularly impressed by the exhibition. There's a downstairs exhibition space where I saw Piranesi before, but it was closed as they were preparing an exhibition on Norway's most famous female painter, Harriet Backer, which I certainly love to have seen because her work is very much up my alley, and the older art in the museum is very dominated by men, something that is by no means rare, and I appreciate that the National Museum draws attention to the 17th century Italian painter, Artemisia Gentileschi, but I still felt like they could have done more. This is an area I actually think the National Gallery of Ireland does well in, plus that museum's free. So, maybe we're doing some things right in this country. But yeah, for the pieces alone, the National Museum is certainly worth visiting. It is enormous, so don't expect to see everything in one day, but it's a great collection, and here's a montage of some of my favorites. In terms of other amenities, there's a nice little auditorium, this swanky cafe restaurant, and a small library which is open to the public. So the National Museum's got a lot going for it, and I do really like it, but there's something missing. Like I said, it is this kind of platonic ideal of a national art museum, and as such, it lacks a certain degree of character. This scathing review by Architectural Record would argue that has to do with its monotonous design, and I do think that there's a fine line between sleekness and coldness to the National Museum. The National Museum has all the traits of a great community space on paper, but just isn't all that welcoming. Cost of entry is a factor in this. Even if membership isn't very expensive, you can't just walk into it like you can with the massive Dijkman Bjørvika public library or walk all over it like the Opera House. Instead, the National Museum feels more like it was built for its donors and tourists. That's what I felt when I was in the cafe. Even its library is dark, enclosed, and a little ominous. Just compared to the Dijkman Bjørvika, which is full of variety and light and possesses a resounding sense of community, which I'm personally into. But overall, the National Museum does everything you'd expect a $720 million national art museum to do, and very well at that. And one area it does particularly well in is the gift shop. Yeah, I love art museum gift shops because they tend to be very thoughtful about what they stock and have great books on art and other subjects. I especially love buying postcards and then putting them on my wall when I get home because they're both special artworks to me in themselves. I like to look at outside the museum and also personal mementos of my travels. A bad art museum gift shop can impact my overall feelings on an art museum far more than I care to admit. Hugh Lane Gallery, I have nothing to say to you. Anyway, the National Museum gift shop is top tier. Not only do they have these very niche books, they also have a massive selection of minimalist crafts and homeware, which I can definitely afford. But the highlight is their postcard collection, because damn! For a start, they've got a very wide selection of postcards. A lot of museums will only have postcards for their very most famous pieces, or worse, paintings that aren't even in the museum. Hamburg Kunsthalle, what is wrong with you? But not the National Museum. I'll have my Edvard Munch Rue Lafayette postcard, thank you very much. They also give these coloured backgrounds to the postcards, which really elevates them in my opinion, and I ended up getting these 6 postcards. But their tote bags are absolute toilet. Sorry. So, in summary, I'd give the National Museum a 9 out of 10. It may have a bit of an elitist vibe, and doesn't really push the envelope that much in general, but its sheer scale and sense of quality, along with the amenities and the great art itself, still makes it a place I really like. Plus it has a sick logo, which counts. Now if they just learned how to print it on a basic canvas tote bag, they'd have their bills paid in no time. Alright, and we have finished another video. Currently watching baseball, hoping that the Baltimore Orioles can make something happen, even if my beloved Blue Jays fumbled the bag last week. But yeah, thanks for watching. Different kind of video, but I enjoyed making it and I hope you enjoyed watching it. Might be more of that kind of stuff coming. I'm working a lot at the moment. Currently saving up to move out basically. So you know, trying to get out what videos I can, but just it takes a while to do proper video essays. So yeah, I hope you like this one. Like, subscribe, check out the Instagram, and have a good one.